That's okay. Can you solo the effects?
That sounded like
Oh, I see. So it's sort of a big crowd. I hear. So he's
too big.
Yeah, but this stuff is good. This has been probably the most difficult project yet. Just sort of the restraint of the soundtrack. You can hide in sound. In other words, if you have bad dialogue or if you have things that are kind of sloppy from a technical standpoint, oftentimes in sound you can kind of spackle over it with Bondo and kind of hide the imperfections in more noise. On a gritty movie like Seven, it's okay to kind of have this, grungy, crappy track, but in this film, it's all about just the loneliness of the space and nothing to do but just sit there and hear children down the street and the clip-clop of horses. And so all the imperfection is right up there in front, and it has to be just presented as this period piece. And so that's been very challenging for all of us in terms of the dialogue editorial and in terms of the sound and in the mix. And it's also a lengthy film. It's 10 reels long. So it's, in a way, it feels almost like it's 2 films in terms of workload. So what about right there? Thomas? When I was writing down the note, we kind of played in the first few words here. To kind of get warmed up to the environment and just to start absorbing as much of the culture and of that period in which Benjamin grew up in New Orleans. David kept saying things like, the French Quarter, it's live and it's bustling and there's music coming from all these different windows, and that's acoustic music performed, and people in different restaurants or bars or pubs or brothels would all be vying for the passersby's ear, so there would be this noise coming at you. And so Aaron Zeller, he was working on location, and I thought, this guy's from New Orleans, he knows it like the back of his hand, we should hire him to go out and just collect background sounds. So he did, and he'd go into bars and just set up he brought in these little hidden microphones and put them on his sunglasses and went and recorded. A lot of these sounds, we didn't have vintage vehicles, these Model Ts and vintage trains and all these sounds of yesteryear that we no longer can have access to. Even just the sound of the swamp or the birds or the crickets or the cicadas are very unique. And if you listen in the track, there's that sort of pulsating cicada texture that happens often in the summertime. So we were lucky to have fresh new sounds.
Okay. And then he comes up, stand up, and he's up into this, like that. And we see her come in the background, like that. Quiet, please. 1 sec. Sound speed, Wayne. Speeding. Play back.
On the day that David's filming, all the people that are in the background, they actually don't say anything. They're just extras that are mouthing.
Background. And action.
Absolutely. Damn right. So you know what my father says to me? He says, "Who the hell do you think you are?"
And so they have to be replaced.
All right. So you know what my father says to me? He says, "Who the hell do you think you are?"
And oftentimes when their voices are replaced, they're replaced with actors who might be from Los Angeles, And so there's always a faction of dedicated New Orleans people that will be listening and, those aren't real accents. So we wanted to make sure they were true.
Same old crap every day.
If you watch the film, a lot of it takes place in the Nolan house, which is a retirement home with lots of old folks. So capturing the sound of old people talking about stuff, but with the right accent, you can't hire people to do it as well as just if you could just sneak in someplace and collect all these sounds. So Aaron went into the house and a couple other retirement homes, and poor old people were freaked out because they didn't know who this guy was. He's in there and he's, kind of got these headphones on. He's sitting there looking there. And if you listen through all the takes, it's funny because some of these people go, "We didn't know who you were, Sugar. We thought you were some stranger looking to case the joint or something." And it was just hilarious. But some of the recordings that he got were great. They're priceless.
Get them bones and chop that up right there. Chop that up, come on. And chop up them onions real good.
You'll hear a great clip where Brad Pitt comes home after the war and comes home to see his mom, and he, of course, has gotten a lot younger, and he's sort of wanting to know if she'll even recognize who he is, and he comes back home, and we had all this space to fill, and at one point we had just nothing, just silence, and David's like, "Can't we put some sound in there? It's so flat." And so we had this great clip that Aaron recorded of this old lady who's trying to like get out of her bed, and she's going, I'm ready. And finally the African-American nurse goes, "Okay, Miss Abuelita, I'm coming for you, honey." And it's just this great thing that you could never write. You could never come up with it, you know?
I'm ready. I'm coming. All right, I'm coming, Miss Abuelita.
A lot of the job was just listening to these recordings and cherry picking. Oh, that's great. We should got to put it in the movie somewhere, you know, that kind of stuff.
You're looking at him when he stands up, look at his face, and then look at his feet, and then look back at him like, you got to, like, what?
We had a lot working against us, you know, just in terms of noise. And so cleaning up the dialogue was very difficult. Now in New Orleans, it's a metropolitan city with freeways and rumble. And what David wanted was just quiet dialogue with just chickens, you know, in the background, and wind. And so that was very challenging because our production sound recordist, Mark Weingarten, had a real hard time with these locations because they were noisy. I mean, the Nolan house, you go in the backyard, it's just, and you have got all this dialogue happening. And so a lot of it, in fact, one of the first rules that David came up with was anytime an actor is outside, they shall be looped, which is really hard on many levels, most notably just performance, because the actor gives so much on the day, and then to have them come back in and try and redo it again is very difficult for them because, you know, it's hard to come all the way back up to that level of performance.
Well, he got another thing coming, that's for sure. God be my witness, he got another thing coming.
Left us $18 that night you was found. $18
$20 and a good night, baby.
In the film, the dialogue that you hear, for example, if it is production, oftentimes it's not even when they are actually saying their dialogue. It's a culmination of many different cuts within that. And David's very involved with every little nuance and finding just the right pitch and tone for every little word. So it's a really long, drawn-out process, but it's a lot of fun just to kind of hone in the characters.
Y'all listen. Y'all listen up here. We're gonna have us a visitor that's gonna be staying with us for a little while.
My sister had a child and she couldn't see right by it, so.
You know what? Maybe I need to watch this again. Because I can't look at the paper and look up there.
Okay. Let me hit that one back. Just for Dr. Rose says he ain't got much more time.
Oh, God in heaven. He looks just like my ex-husband.
Look, he's prematurely old. Dr. Rose said he ain't got much more time on this earth.
Well, join the club.
I just wonder if the last line Dr. Rose says he ain't got much more time.
Oh.
Yeah, really feel sorry for him. Okay, let's just pick that up. Dr. Rose says
135, Doc.
You are so silly.
Mama, some days I feel different than the day before.
Part of the challenge with Benjamin Button's voice when he's 7 years old, yet he looks like a 75-year-old man, was to make him sound, on one hand, childlike, but on another hand, elderly.
Molasses. I don't think I have worms.
So it was that quandary of how do you do the sound. And I thought, well, he would sound kind of like a little baby, like, you know, he would sound like this, and, Mama, how much longer do I have to live?
Mama, how much longer I got?
So a lot of that original recording of Brad was like that, and we had it cut in for a while, but then when the animation came in, I think David realized it wasn't really quite the right sound, and was dissatisfied with that as a texture.
Mama, how much longer I got?
David Fincher kept saying, well, let's just pitch it and run it through the throat program and do this and do that, and it's going to come out great, you know. And we did due diligence on the original recordings and tried as best as we could to make technology create this texture and create this effect. But ultimately, what we found out was that it sounded science fiction-esque.
Molasses.
These tools, you know, maybe there'll be a new technology which will allow for this. But right now, currently, we don't have technology that doesn't end up sounding like you're in a sci-fi film. And it would be great if it was a science fiction film. Then you could hear all the digital artifacts and it would be acceptable.
Molasses.
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 He had a conversation with Brad Pitt himself, and apparently Brad said, well, wouldn't it be more gravelly? And I think it was Brad who kind of came up with this sort of, hey, Mama, how much longer I got?
Mama, how much longer I got?
So then he kind of did this sort of, forced his throat, forced this sort of gravelly sound all the way up here. Kind of like Froggy from Little Rascals.
Mama, how much longer I got? Mama, how much longer I got?
And then we just pitch it slightly.
How old are you? 7, but I look a lot older.
7, but I look a lot older. 7, but I look a lot older.
Believe it or not, it's mostly Brad Pitt just making that sound. Again, in this setting, it's so natural and real that we had to ask the actors to create it. And you know what? It was the best thing to do.
Come on over here, you. Now, this is my granddaughter, Daisy.
David wanted to have Cate Blanchett revoice her young 10-year-old version of herself. And Ellie Fanning, who is the actor who plays the young Daisy, was recorded on set, and we have her voice. It was fine. It's a little girl's voice. She sounds great. She's a great actor. And then David goes, let's revoice her. And, you know, fear, doubt, you know, all these things come in. Okay, Ray, well, what, you want to have another kid do her voice? No, let's have Kate do it. Oh, you know, it's never going to work. It's not going to work. It's a disastrous idea. And it works.
Did you know turkeys aren't really birds?
Why do you say that?
They're in the pheasant family. They can't hardly fly. It's sad, don't you think? A bird that can't fly. Did you know turkeys aren't really birds?
Why did he say that?
They're in the pheasant family. Can't hardly fly. It's sad, don't you think? Birds that can't fly.
She went into a female falsetto and created, you know, the young Daisy vocal. And despite the fact that she's talking up here, you can still get a sense of her chest cavity. So Dave Parker, our dialogue mixer, spent a lot of time sculpting, in terms of equalization, all the low-frequency components of her voice and getting rid of those and filtering it so that we just had the high end of her vocal texture. And then again, we took that and pitched it up a few steps. Probably not that much, though. It's again, with that sound, it's 95% the actor.
Again, read it again.
Oh, read it again, please.
Again, read it again.
Oh, read it again, please.
Again, read it again.
Oh, read it again, please.
What's really interesting is that when you watch the scene where Benjamin Button and Daisy sneak underneath the table and they have their first encounter and this first conversation, that's where you'll be able to hear Kate's voice over Ellie Fanning's face. And it's actually brilliant now in retrospect. It's taken me a long time to get to this point. But if you think about it, what's interesting is that Brad Pitt, he's not even there, right? Because it's a CG character, yet it's his voice. And Ellie Fanning's there, but she's not really there. It's this other voice.
Your turn.
I'm younger than I look.
I thought so. You don't seem like an old person. Like my grandma.
So there's this weird dichotomy and weird kind of checks and balances thing that happens in the scene. And it works in a very peculiar way. It kind of creates a global oddness to the track.
Your turn. I'm not as old as I look.
I thought so. You don't seem like an old person. Like my grandma.
I'm not.
Many times when you work in your pigeonhole of whatever it is that you're doing, you think that that work is what's important. And here's the film over here, and here's your contribution to it. And this is important. But really it's not. It's this. And I think that it takes a while to kind of get to the point where you can appreciate that this can be thrown away. And it's not important. What's important is David's film and how to make that speak. And that's been the best learning experience for me.